So we enter into a 14-day period that will fundamentally transform the trajectory in South Africa. And the reason I say that is we've got a local government election that took place that was unprecedented in the history of South Africa's democratic project. And the reason this is the case is because for the first time we see an equitable distribution of power, specifically in a number of metro municipalities. The question that often arises is, why are these metro municipalities so important? Well, if you start looking at analysing the numbers, one from a population perspective, the collective population of the city of Johannesburg, the city of Tshwane, the city of Cape Town, Ekurhuleni and Nelson Mandela Metro is more than 18 million people in South Africa. So that's more than 40% of South Africa's population or thereabouts. Secondly, the collective GDP and the contribution in terms of GDP of all of these 4 metro municipalities, more than 55% of South Africa's GDP. And so the talks and the discussions that will emerge over the next 14 days are going to be instrumental in terms of the long-term outlook for a number of these metro municipalities. What is played out? Well, we've got the likelihood that there might be a potential coalition between the Democratic Alliance and the ANC in these 3 metro municipalities. Is that going to happen? I don't think so. The Democratic Alliance have been very particular in terms of saying that we're not going to negotiate with the ANC. The second possibility is that we get a coalition between the ANC and the EFF in Johannesburg, in Tshwane and in Nelson Mandela Metro. And this is dependent on 2 things. I think the EFF has been quite particular in terms of their demands on the internal changes within the ANC. And I think it's dependent on how willing the ANC is in terms of the repositioning of the party before we can talk about coalitions. And that's not easy. The ANC goes into a special NEC on Thursday for 4 days, and that NEC will have front and center the issue of the local government election. Is there a possibility that we might get a coalition between the ANC and EFF? I think there's a slight possibility. The bigger potential that might play out from here is that we get a negotiation between the economic freedom fighters and the Democratic Alliance in all 3 metro municipalities, and a deal is carved out. The nature of that deal will probably mean that we'll get an EFF mayor in one of the cities and a DA mayor in the 2 other remaining cities. A lot of this analysis must be put into perspective. And there's never a better case study than 2006 in South Africa in the city of Cape Town. And let me play that out. In 2006, we got the election results at a local government level in the city of Cape Town, and the ANC won 81 seats in a 210-seat metro municipality. The Democratic Alliance won 90 seats. And so individually, neither of the parties would have the requisite majority to be able to govern the city. So we had to enter into an intense period of negotiation. The Kingmaker at the time was postulated as the Independent Democrats headed up by Patricia de Lille. The ANC plus the Independent Democrats had a total of 104 seats collectively. The Democratic Alliance with 90 seats, together with all of the small parties who achieved 1, 2, 3 seats, collectively came to 106 seats. And after a series of 11 to 12 days of intense negotiations between the DA and the Independent Democrats, the deal broke off. And so eventually at the last minute, we had a negotiation between the Democratic Alliance and a grouping of small parties, and we had 106 versus 104, and we all know where the city of Cape Town played out. So I think we mustn't be premature in terms of looking at what might play out. I think we've got to wait for the 14 days to come through. What happens after the 14 days? Well, the municipal manager of each one of these municipalities across the country calls a special sitting of the council, and that's where we elect the mayor, the deputy mayor, and from there we get the members of the mayoral committee and effectively the governing coalition that will run all of these metro municipalities. I want to move beyond the metro municipalities because I think there's been a big focus in terms of the 4 metro municipalities. There are a number of other municipalities which are also hung. It's a number of 29 metro municipalities and ordinary municipalities that are ready for a potential coalition or deal that could be negotiated. What that means is that politicians have to look and negotiate beyond individual metro municipalities. So there is a chance and there's a likelihood that the Democratic Alliance could negotiate a deal with the UDM and 1 or 2 other smaller parties in Nelson Mandela Metro. But it wouldn't be realistic to do so if they're having a negotiation with the EFF at other levels. And so you've got to look at this more systemically, understanding where are these 29 metro municipalities, who are the various power brokers, how do you negotiate with some of the small parties, and negotiate in some way that we're able to give a little bit, but not too much. And so I think the coalition that we see, or the potential coalitions that we see, will to a certain extent determine the trajectory that will play out at the national and provincial government level in 2019. Number two, it will really give us the opportunity to see what it means for some parties like the EFF to move from the opposition benches into becoming a governing party, even though it's at a local level. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, I think for us as South Africans, for the business sector, for the government services sector, and for all sectors across South Africa, the local government level is really around the daily delivery of basic services. And the hope is that we can get some kind of stable government in place in all of the metro municipalities and the other municipalities in South Africa, so that we can get effective governance at a level that's critically important for all citizens across South Africa.